Isaac Manor stood at the gate after 5 long years in prison. Looking outside, he saw the reception committee waiting for him. His ex-wife, his ex-daughter, her father, her mother, and his brother. Isaac turned his head to the guard and asked, "Sir, is there another way out? I don't want to go through this corridor." He nodded towards the small crowd in front of the gate. "Don't you want to see your family?" the guard asked in surprise. "I don't have any family anymore. They all betrayed me. And then there's the little thing of a restraining order, although I don't know if that's still in effect." The guard thought for a moment. This prisoner was always very helpful and friendly. He called to tell the gatekeeper that he would be using the back exit and told Isaac, "That way." The guard led Isaac through a maze of corridors until they came to a small steel door. The guard unlocked it and escorted Isaac outside. At 2:30, Lydia, Isaac's ex-wife, looked at her watch and asked her father, "He was supposed to leave at 2, wasn't he?" When her father nodded yes, Lydia walked up to the gate and asked the guard at the booth what time Isaac Manor could be expected. The guard checked his log and replied, "He was released half an hour ago, at his request, through the back door." Lydia began to cry as she asked, "The back door? Why? We came to meet him. I know he's mad at us, but that much? He doesn't have anyone else. Do you have his address?" "I can't give you his address, ma'am. He specifically asked not to tell anyone, and I overheard his conversation with the sergeant. He also said there was a restraining order. Do you want to see him back in prison after everything he's been through?" Lydia turned pale. "Restraining order? Oh crap, I completely forgot about that." Meanwhile, Isaac walked briskly towards the bus station, reflecting on the past 6 years. He had plans, places to visit, and people to meet. 6 years ago, Isaac was a happy man, married to Lydia for 18 years and doting on his 16-year-old daughter, Tommy, named after her grandmother, Thomasina. At the time, he was 40 years old and working as a software engineer. He could write his own computer programs and developed self-learning robots as a hobby. He also worked on his so-called discipline project, reconfiguring his security system to add an independent backup system. It included a covert communication channel with a remote and hidden hard drive server. The entire system had an independent power source, powered by solar tiles on the roof. On a whim, he built another secret system in his garden with 4 petabytes of backup, just outside the garden boundaries but still on his land. To make access more difficult, he designed a dual camera system hidden in a ceiling-mounted sound system. Isaac needed a good security system because his company did a lot of work for the government, and he enjoyed working on this project. His house, large enough for a family, was one of 5 on a cul-de-sac in Dens, along with 4 others. He built a spacious office on the land behind it and still had enough space for a very large garden. The border with a nature reserve, he bought a lot and built a house for cash when he was 20. Using money he earned building an internet search engine for software solutions. He developed it and launched it online, where he was immediately interested in one software giant for use on its internal network. Isaac was an ordinary man, 188 cm tall, weighing 86 kg, with dark blonde hair and light brown eyes in a friendly face with greedy lips and a beard, which he had to shave in the evening if he wanted to look neat. He enjoyed cycling and walking, but did not enjoy strenuous exercise. Isaac was shy, but once he came out of his shell, he was a caring, charming, witty person and a good conversationalist who could talk about a variety of topics. He was also an avid reader and could quickly read any text, and even years later could remember articles and passages from books. This was very useful to him in his work. 6 years ago, there came a time when the local sheriff, Peter Ramsey, asked him to update the program that controlled the traffic lights in Dens. Traffic flow needed to be improved to reduce pollution. At that moment, everything went downhill for Isaac. When Isaac and Lydia invited the sheriff to dinner to discuss the progress of the project, the man immediately began fantasizing about her as soon as he saw Lydia. It took the sheriff 6 months to fulfill his fantasy. Late that morning, Isaac finished his traffic light project and returned home to celebrate and take his wife out to dinner. He saw a car he didn't recognize in the driveway. Guests, he thought. He entered the house and his wife cheated on him with the sheriff. "What the hell is going on here?" he shouted. The sheriff grinned at Isaac. He then mockingly said to Lydia, "Oh, baby, I'll leave you two alone until you explain the rules to him." Lydia looked slightly embarrassed, but nodded in agreement as the sheriff walked out of the house, scratching his groin. As the door closed behind him, Lydia asked Isaac, "Can we discuss this like adults?" Isaac's shock and grief gave way to icy, calm anger. "I want you to leave the house. Pack your things and leave." "No, you gave me the opportunity to have this affair. It won't take long. It'll be over soon. If you don't agree, the consequences will be yours, and you won't like them. If you file for divorce, I'll take everything from you. You are there, and you will never see Tommy again. You're out of your mind. You can't think I'll agree to this. Are you crazy?" Lydia sighed. "I was afraid you would react this way. I love you, but I need this, and it will pass." With icy calm, Isaac objected. "Are you cheating on me and threatening me? You should know that I don't like threats. Now I will leave and return at 6 in the evening. During this time, you can be with your lover as much as you want. I won't touch you. But when I return, you better leave." Lydia opened her mouth, thought better, and headed into the bedroom with her head down. 5 minutes later, Isaac was back in his car and calling his lawyer to set up a meeting. In the evening, Isaac returned to the empty house, and his anger turned to sadness and grief. The next morning, Isaac's lawyer, Ben Green, walked into Isaac's home office. Ben and Isaac were good friends, so meeting before work started was easily arranged. Isaac picked up the kettle and asked, "Coffee?" "Yes, black with a little water. Your coffee, as a paint remover, is too harsh on my stomach lining. So what's the big problem that made you want to see me so urgently?" Isaac said he found Sheriff Peter Ramsey having sex with Lydia and the threats Lydia made. Ben looked shocked and even a little scared. "Peter Ramsey, damn, that's bad news. He's as corrupt as a rotting carcass, but no one can prove it. He talked Lydia into it, and he always has another agenda too. You need to protect yourself, financially and possibly physically." Isaac's brain was working at full speed. His friend was rarely intimidated, so he came up with a quick and dirty solution. "I'll give you power of attorney. You can print out the relevant documents here, and I'll sign them right away. If things go wrong, you can manage my finances. I'll give you a flash drive with all of it. Relevant information, and you need to start the divorce." Ben nodded, and at 9:30, he was about to leave when there was a loud bang and the door swung open. 5 police officers rushed in and forced the 2 men to the floor. "Which one of you is Isaac Manor?" one shouted. Isaac, lying face down, mumbled into the carpet that he was the one they were looking for. "You are under arrest," said the officer. "For what?" Isaac asked in amazement. "As if you don't know. Your wife and daughter filed a complaint against you for beating. They are now being examined," the officer said. "Beating? Did I beat up Lydia and Tommy? No way. I didn't touch them, and I haven't seen my daughter at all since yesterday morning." Ben intervened. "Isaac, be quiet. Don't say anything. I'll sort it out." He turned to the officer and asked, "Where are you taking him?" "On 2nd Street, the officer answered shortly. "Be careful, Isaac. Don't let yourself be drawn into conversations without my presence," Ben shouted as Isaac was pushed into the police car. Ben quickly drove to his office and locked the flash drive in the safe. He informed his fiancée, Anna, who was also his secretary, that Isaac had encountered Sheriff Ramsey and was suddenly arrested for attacking Lydia and Tommy. He rushed to the station on 2nd Street. When he arrived, he introduced himself as Isaac's lawyer and was instructed by the duty officer to wait. An hour later, the officer informed him dryly that Mr. Manor had been transferred to the Forest Line station. A chill ran down Ben's spine. It seemed to him that Ramsay was trying to keep him away from Isaac in order to have more time for forced confessions, so he rushed to the Forest Line. At the counter, he told the officer on duty that he had come for Mr. Manor, and the waiting game began again. When the officer said that Isaac was not here, but that he was at the station on 2nd Street, Ben's patience ran out. He took out his cell phone, scrolled through his contacts, and pressed the speed dial for a friendly judge. He explained to the judge what happened, who was involved, and that he was being led by the nose. The judge asked Ben to put him on speakerphone. In a clear voice, he asked, "Mr. Green, is the officer on duty next to you?" "Yes, sir. The officer is listening, now with his superior." "Okay. Gentlemen, this is Judge Orlando speaking. It seems the police are preventing Mr. Manor's lawyer from negotiating with him. Is that so? 3 transfers before noon seems rather strange." "No, sir. It's just a clinical error. Manor is on 2nd Street." The officer hesitated, thinking, damn. Sheriff Ramsay can kiss my ass. I'm not going to be the target of this judge's wrath. When Mr. Green arrives at 2nd Street, he must have access to Mr. Manor without delay. You see, Mr. Green must speak to an unharmed Mr. Manor as soon as he enters the station. That means no bruises, no falling down the stairs, no accidents, and without interrogation, without the presence of his lawyer. Have I made myself clear, gentlemen? Now, for the record, your names, ranks, and badge numbers, please." Both men were sweating despite the air conditioning. When the phone conversation ended, the boss offered to escort him to 2nd Street. There, he found Isaac sitting in his cell, waiting for Ben. Ben took the recorder out of his bag and pressed the record button. "Isaac, did they try to talk to you?" "Yes, they did. They also tried to intimidate me. They threatened to use a baton if I didn't admit to beating Lydia and Tommy and causing them serious bodily harm. I told them to do what they had to do, but that I wouldn't say anything without the presence of my lawyer." "Did they treat you well?" "They didn't treat me at all. I haven't been allowed to drink since they brought me here, and I haven't been allowed to go to the toilet." Then suddenly everything stopped. I was allowed to use the toilet and given a cup of disgusting tea. I'm afraid of what's in store for me. "Sorry, Isaac, I'm afraid of this too. This is all too well thought out. Were you transferred to another station?" "No, I've been here since my arrest." Ben took a deep breath. "I'll assign your case to a colleague. I'm basically a family law attorney. I'll handle your divorce. My colleague is much better suited for this game. Do you agree?" "Yes, that's okay. Don't forget to use your power of attorney." 6 months later in court, Isaac was left no chance. Photographic evidence was presented, as well as testimony from Lydia and Tommy and 2 women Isaac had never heard of who said Isaac was prone to angry outbursts. Isaac was unable to provide an alibi for the evening because the hard drives suddenly failed while they were being tested. He didn't want to reveal his backup system, which was independent from the one they sabotaged. It might be needed in the future. The prosecutor portrayed him as a bad father and an even worse husband who tortured and beat his wife and daughter. All this time, Lydia and Tommy sat, staring uncomfortably ahead. Isaac thought they didn't look very healthy, but he didn't care. He himself sat stoically in the courtroom, awaiting the verdict. The jury swallowed it all and found Isaac guilty of all charges. Finally, the judge announced the verdict. Isaac was sent to prison for a term of 5.5 years with credit for time spent in pre-trial detention. With luck, he could have been released in 3.5 years, but Isaac was counting on the full 5 because of the sheriff's tentacles. When the judge announced the verdict, he heard Lydia scream. Turning to her, he saw that she had turned pale, and his daughter was sobbing in tears. The only one who grinned like the talk of the town was Peter Ramsay. Isaac received a visitor in his cell. The only thing the woman said when she handed him the thick envelope was, "You have been handed it." Isaac gave the envelope to his lawyer and asked him to give it to Ben Green. Left alone, Isaac sat down on a hard bench. 2 weeks into his prison sentence, Ben came to visit Isaac to talk about his divorce. The envelope contained divorce papers and papers regarding Tommy's adoption by Peter Ramsay. Isaac signed them without hesitation, although it was painful for him. He then reviewed Lydia's demands with Ben. A house, half their savings, $5,000 a month for 5 years, and an educational fund for Tommy's schooling. Ben smiled, but didn't say anything until he pulled out a small high-frequency buzzer to prevent eavesdropping. Finally, Isaac was puzzled and said, "That's it. So if I sign this, they'll leave me alone and won't be able to refuse it." Ben, still smiling, replied, "Yes, it's true." Isaac froze for a moment. "The house was mine before we got married, so this is completely unacceptable. It remains mine. Please mutiny him and hug the fence. Turn off the water, but leave the electricity on. And since that bastard is going to adopt Tommy, let him pay for her education. So 5 times 12 times $5K is $300K, right? Just pay it off in one lump sum, and half of our savings is about $700,000. Offer them a lump sum of $1 million and tell them to accept a lump sum payment. No houses or funds for education. Otherwise, handle things as dirty as possible." Ben gathered his things and told Isaac that he would make a counter-offer. Just before he turned off the beep, he asked, "Lydia didn't know about the investment fund." Isaac responded, "I mentioned it sometimes, but I never told her how big it was. By the way, has the city already paid to upgrade their traffic light program?" "I don't think so, so if I were you, I'd remind them. This money, about $175,000, is your fee. I may still need your help in the future." Ben returned home both sad and happy. Sad because his friend disappeared for the next 5 years in prison for something he didn't do. Happy because he could finally afford to buy the house he and his fiancée had their eye on. But first they had to extract $175,000 from the municipality. Ben knew that they legally owed this amount, but they would probably try their best not to pay it. The next day, Isaac found himself in his new home. After the obligatory speech from the warden, he was escorted to his new location. When he was in his cell, he was greeted by the largest man he had ever seen. He was told that K2 was the biggest bully in the prison and was promised that he would be given a warm welcome. K2 was writing something on a piece of paper with concentration. Isaac watched all this carefully and politely cleared his throat. K2 growled at him, "If you tell the others that I write poorly, you will die a very painful death." Isaac was stunned and asked, "Nobody bothered to teach you?" K2 looked up, surprised. "You're the first one to ask. I've had to work since I was 8. What are you trying to write?" "Sorry for asking." "A letter to my grandmother. Her 87th birthday is next week." "Can I help?" "If you dictate, I will write." "No, I want to write it myself." "I'm not finished. When I finish writing, you can rewrite this." "That's a good idea," K2 exclaimed enthusiastically and hit Isaac on the shoulder. "Oh, be careful. I'm not a mountain. Do you want to learn to read and write? I can teach you if you want." The man everyone was afraid of had tears in his eyes as he said, "Yes, I would really like it, but if you tell others." Isaac quickly responded to defuse the situation. "Why should I? You try, and that makes me want to help you. Anyone who tries deserves help. My name is Isaac. What about you?" "I'm Fabian Small. Don't laugh, but everyone calls me K2. I don't know why, but call me K2. K2 is the second highest mountain in the world. It is also the most dangerous mountain in the world, much more dangerous than Everest. I think you have to live up to your reputation, Fabian." Isaac smiled when he said this. And so the ice was broken, and K2 dictated his letter for his grandmother. Isaac wrote it down in capital letters, and K2 copied it without much difficulty. Lessons began soon after. 2 weeks later, a call came in for registration. Isaac was called. He was not expecting visitors. His brother, during his only visit, reprimanded Isaac and said he didn't want anything to do with him anymore. The only other person he expected to see was Ben, who was due to visit him next week. Isaac walked into the visiting room and saw his soon-to-be ex-wife and daughter. He walked up to the table and, with the guard behind him, mockingly said, "Have you come to have fun? Well, here's your chance." He turned around, told the guard, "I'm done. I want to go back to my cell, please," and walked away. He heard Lydia cry behind him, "Isaac, please wait." He simply walked on, and the door slammed behind him. Isaac turned to the guard and asked, "Sir, is there any way to prevent such visits in the future? They issued a restraining order on me, and now they come to tease me. I can definitely do without such visitors." The guard told Isaac that he would talk to the warden. Ben and Isaac sat in a small conference room reserved for lawyers and clients. As usual, Ben pulled out his noise silencing device before he said, "I have a modified divorce proposal here." Isaac raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean changed? More money? What else?" Ben looked at his papers and replied, "No, Lydia is willing to give up half the money if she can talk to you." "Sorry, Ben, but you will be the bearer of bad news for her. Please tell her verbally that I would rather give up that $500,000 than talk to her or her friends and family." "Isaac, this is a very expensive refusal. You understand that, don't you?" "Yes, Ben, I understand, but it's just money, and I've been humiliated enough. Please pass on this message and let them go to hell." Ben sighed. "Okay, I'll do as you ask. Is there anything else I can do for you?" Isaac smiled in anticipation of what would happen next. He said, "Yes, you can. I need children's books to read, from the very beginning level to the highest. 2 books for each level." He was not disappointed. Ben's jaw dropped and his eyes were wide. Ben stammered, "Why would you do that? Are you brainwashed here?" "No, but keep it a secret. It's for my cellmate. I'm teaching him to read, and he's doing pretty well. So now I need books for him to read." Ben smiled. "That's just the way you are, Isaac Manor. Okay, I'll take care of it." The following week, Isaac received a package at the postal call. To the delight of the guards and prisoners, one of the guards unpacked the books, then commented on Isaac's intelligence. Isaac just shrugged and accepted the comments without words. Back in his cell, K2 was furious at the comments, but Isaac simply laughed and said, "Don't worry. You and I know better. Just keep up the good work. Now I want you to start with these 2 books. I'll have questions when you're done, so read carefully." "What? Do you want me to read books? I don't need to read books. I want to be able to read so they don't deceive me." "You are seriously mistaken, my friend, in many ways. Firstly, reading books helps you read newspapers and other texts better, because you recognize words more easily. Secondly, and this is, in my opinion, more important, reading books teaches you are much more than just better to read. Newspapers and books can be very interesting when you read well. Just bear with me, please. Start reading these damn books, and be careful that they don't see you." Fabian grumbled, "Okay, I'll try, but only because you called me friend." "Aren't we friends?" And Isaac extended his hand. K2's big paw enveloped him as he responded, "Yes, you are my first and only friend." Isaac's only thought was that K2 must have lived a terribly lonely life, and he wanted to change that for the giant. Isaac went into his cell after he was beaten. K2 immediately jumped to his feet, forgetting about the book. Angrily, and with a sound like rocks scraping, he asked, "What the hell happened?" Isaac croaked, "Looks like my wife is insistent on taking my house, so her friend Sheriff Peter Ramsey sent me a message. You don't want to give up your house? They will do this until you agree. K2 growled. Even if they kill me, I don't care. But the house is mine and will remain mine, if only because of the sentimental value. K2 looked at the man. You're serious, I see. Can you describe them? Isaac gave K2 a description of one of the 4 men before heading to the prison infirmary. The next day, 4 more people were taken to the prison infirmary. The message was clear to all prisoners and guards. Isaac must be left alone. Over the next month, K2 proved to be a real sponge for information and an avid reader. He was very smart, and only his illiteracy interfered with its development. Now he was making up for lost time with a vengeance. He also began referring other prisoners to Isaac, who became Dr. Isaac. Isaac now had a class of about 10 prisoners who needed training. During one of these lessons, a conversation arose about life after prison and the difficulties associated with finding a job. Some of them nodded, because they were returning to prison for the second time. When Isaac asked why, they explained that almost no one wanted to hire ex-convicts or only offered very low salaries. When they wanted to start their own business, they needed an investor or a bank loan. Both, given their past, were extremely unlikely or involved astronomical percentages. This gave Isaac an idea. He asked them what kind of business they would like to start. One man, who had only 4 months left before his release, admitted to Isaac that he was a baker and wanted to start his own bakery. So Isaac asked him to write a plan for what he would need. The man looked at him strangely until Isaac told him to consider it a math assignment. K2 was also in this lesson, so Isaac asked what he would like to do after his release. K2 told Isaac that he would really like to work in security. Isaac smiled and said, "Need a thief to catch a thief? I have an idea, and if it works, I can help you. From now on, you are my head of security, okay?" With his characteristic sound, like the grinding of stones, K2 replied, "Oh, yes, I agree. Very much agree." And again they shook hands. During Ben's month-long visit, Isaac explained his idea. He wanted to create an investment fund that would allow former prisoners to start their own businesses. The fund would also help the man or woman with legal and financial formalities. Did Ben want to participate? Isaac wanted to use part of his investment fund as seed money after the divorce was finalized. Ben thought for a moment and then said, "I'm with you. You handle the financial side and I'll handle the legal side. Let's shake hands and I'll get started right away." What a brilliant idea. Then he thought again. Isaac noticed this immediately and said softly, "What's bothering you? Spit it out." Ben replied, "I talked to Lydia for a long time. She signed the divorce papers and is now only asking for half of her savings without alimony. She was shocked by your answer and seemed to realize that she had no chance of getting you to talk to her. She won't claim the house and will not ask for funds for Thomasina's studies. I have documents here for you to sign." Isaac signed the divorce papers, reflecting on Lydia's change of heart. 6 months later, he became single again. His first thought was about freedom, but in reality, it was not so. Isaac was getting used to life in prison. The investment fund he and Ben set up was doing very well. They have already helped many prisoners either find a decent job or start their own business, and now the money invested has begun to bring good profits. Isaac was highly respected, and any newcomer who tried to contact him received a very painful lesson in manners. Isaac now even had a room for his lessons, as the guards and warden were well aware of the calming effect Isaac had on these sometimes violent men. This made their work easier. One day, a social worker came up to him and asked, "Why doesn't your name appear on the parole list?" Isaac decided to be frank. "Because the warden is a friend of Sheriff Ramsay, and his reports on me are always negative. Besides, I don't even want parole. What if my parole officer turns out to be one of Ramsay's henchmen? They might return me to prison at their request, and I will have to serve additional time. No, this is not for me. I will leave in a year and be truly free." You have little confidence in this city's legal system. No, madam. I was framed by the sheriff and my ex-wife after I caught them together, but I can't prove it. Please don't talk to me about a fair legal system. Is that all, madam? Yes, yes. Sorry to bother you. It's okay, madam. The prisoners are quite happy with my presence here. The woman looked confused as Isaac left. Isaac went to training and self-defense class. He didn't like to practice self-defense, but K2 insisted on it. During the nearly 4 years he spent in prison, Isaac lost almost all of his fat, which was replaced by hard muscle, simply because K2 demanded that he exercise, and after the final beating, K2 began teaching him how to fight. Fighting dirty, K2 insisted. The only way was to neutralize the enemy as quickly and thoroughly as possible. On his way from the gym to his cell, he was intercepted by a guard. The warden wants to talk to you. In his office, now. Damn, what did they come up with this time? Am I in trouble? He thought, feeling his stomach drop. Seeming calm and collected, he said, Yes, sir. Do I need to take a shower, or can I go like this? The boss said now, You can wash yourself later. 5 minutes after the knock on the door, Isaac was allowed into the boss's office. The chief released the guard and looked at Isaac. I might as well take a shower first. Isaac decided to skip the obvious answer and remained silent. After a moment, the boss continued. I was told that you understand something about computers. Is that true? In a past life, I was a programmer, sir. That doesn't answer my question. Are you computer savvy? That's the question. Something is fishy here. If the boss had problems with his computer, why didn't he just call the city councils at service? Isaac decided to take a risk. Sir, a computer has 2 parts, the software and the hardware. If the problem is in the software, I can probably solve it. A problem with the hardware, that is, the machine itself, is less likely. The car is fine. Now get in and start looking for the problem. With these words, he left the office. Isaac, expecting a catch, began checking the computer. This was a problem and a trap. The internet icon was clearly visible, and they knew that he had asked several times for permission to access the internet, which was always denied, like all his other requests. He decided not to use it. They probably controlled the connection. Isaac began his research. The first thing he found was a keylogger. Ah, cunning, cunning, cunning. Anything else? He smiled to himself and continued checking. After an hour and a half of work, and with a deep sigh of satisfaction, he found many problematic directories and files, poorly hidden, probably by an amateur, and not difficult for a trained professional, even if that professional was a little rusty. Most importantly, he found the problem. This was, even for a talented amateur, quite easy to solve, but it was not what Isaac was going to tell his boss. Isaac had leverage over his boss, and he was going to make the most of it. Isaac waited, standing at the desk with his arms crossed, until the boss and the guard entered the office again. They looked disappointed. The boss asked, dissatisfied, Did you find the problem? Yes, sir. I can explain. But better in private, please. The warden looked at the prisoner, who looked completely calm, and nodded to the guard to leave. Only after the guard closed the door did Isaac begin in a soft but steely voice. I found a huge number of illegal videos on this computer. I also found a program that records everything that happens on the keyboard. There was a software worm in the downloaded videos, which is now slowly corroding your files, including program files. You can try to claim that I downloaded these files, but the internet connection is also monitored externally by the ISP. This way, my lawyer will always be able to prove that I did not touch the internet. I can decide. Your problem, but I need the internet to download some of my cleaning programs. The boss looked a little paler than usual. It was a trap, and it failed. He uploaded the video himself, enjoyed it, and wanted to frame Isaac to use the internet illegally so he could use it to add another year to his sentence. Now he had a much bigger problem than pleasing that idiot Ramsey. Okay, from now on you have unlimited access to the internet. Start solving the problem. Oh no, sir. This will not happen until my lawyer receives written confirmation that I am not responsible for the contents of your computer and that you provide me with unrestricted internet access. How dare you, exclaimed the boss. Isaac remained silent, looking steadily into the boss's eyes, and finally said, or you can call the cities at service to sort it out. As a result, the boss muttered, who is your lawyer? Late in the evening, a week later, Isaac was at work. The warden didn't want anyone to know that the prisoner was messing with his computer, so the first thing Isaac did was disable the keylogger. He then compressed the banned videos but did not delete them from the computer. He hid them so that another programmer could find them over time, but an amateur would not be able to. When he finished this, he installed and activated the internet programs he had chosen and then began looking for solutions to problems on the computer. When the problems were finally solved, he had a brilliant idea. Curious about what his house looked like now and whether his alternative and hidden security system was working, he paused for a moment to remember the IP address and password. To his delight, the system was still functioning, but what he saw simply amazed and outraged him. The house was almost in ruins, and Sheriff Ramsey stood amid the chaos, pointing out some people carrying what appeared to be illegal substances. He heard Ramsey shout, "Come on, we don't have all night. It should be on the streets tomorrow." And suddenly Isaac saw his revenge forming into a plan in his head. At first he had unfinished business here. With a smile on his face, he began preparing the computer. He wrote a small program to make his security system available to view and download live images, loaded it onto his system, and tested that it worked correctly. When he was satisfied, he removed all traces of his actions. He replaced the keylogger with something similar, but not as easily detectable. Finally, when everything was ready, he destroyed the malware that he had previously isolated, but left one small problem, only for the problem to return a year later. Just as Isaac was finishing, the boss burst into the office. "Are you finished?" he asked impatiently. "Just finishing up, sir. I think I've done everything, but I'm a little out of it. If you have any problems, sir, please call." "You can be sure I'll call you and I won't be so lenient. The guard will escort you back. You can go." "Yes, sir. Thank you, sir." And Isaac went out. Returning to his cell, K2 immediately understood from Isaac's face. "What are you up to? You look like the cat that ate the canary." "Revenge, Fabian. Revenge. So, who's next in line to talk to Ben Green? I need him to deliver the letter. Do you have a pen and paper?" A week later, the FBI agent, completely stunned, read with growing concern the letter handed to her by the lawyer sitting in front of her. In the letter, Isaac carefully explained what had happened to him and what was happening in and around his home. At the bottom was a series of numbers and what looked like a password. She asked the lawyer, "Do you still have time? I need to check this with our specialists." Before Ben could answer, the woman dialed the number and gave a few orders, causing Ben to smile discreetly. "I have all day if necessary." The agent was overjoyed. If this information turns out to be true, they can finally put that corrupt scoundrel, Ramsey, behind bars. The it guy came in with a cart containing, among other things, computers and hard drives. After everything was set up, they checked for connectivity. Ben confirmed that this was Isaac's house and was amazed at its condition. After that, he was released. The letter stated that most activities begin late in the evening. There was a lot of turmoil just before Isaac was released. He was waiting for a visitor when Peter Ramsday came in to talk to his legal advisor. Rude and loud, he was shackled and accompanied by 2 guards. Suddenly, he noticed Isaac openly grinning. Isaac couldn't help but laugh loudly. Ramsay became furious and shouted, "Why are you laughing? I still have friends on the outside. They will take care of that charming ass." K2, settling his future with Ben, raised his head and saw Isaac turn pale. K2 looked at Ramsay with hatred in his eyes. Isaac was distracted by his visitor. She led him into a small conference room and pulled out a device from her bag, similar to the one Ben always used. Finally, she said, "Thank you. Your connection helped us catch them in the act. Along with the records from your security system, he will spend a long time behind bars. But that's not what I came for. Because of the sheriff's extracurricular activities, he owes the IRS a lot of money. Usually, when someone reports tax fraud, there is a reward. We decided that this reward will go to you as a sign of gratitude. We do not know what it will be yet, knowing this service." Isaac was surprised that they had put in so much effort and replied, "I appreciate it. Thank you. Seeing that bastard behind bars is enough for me." They talked some more. The agent was trying to figure out how Isaac gained access to his security system. Isaac smiled and answered all the questions evasively. He still had a score to pay with his boss for stripping him of all his privileges and giving him negative reports to keep him inside. That night, Peter Ramsay was made very clear that he should never go near Isaac and his former family in his life. Shortly after this incident, a guard led Isaac through the labyrinth of the prison and watched him leave through the back door. Isaac boarded the bus and bought a ticket with a simple goal. He needed transportation, communications, and a place to stay that night. This is where his network of ex-conv services would come in handy for him. Ex-conv, short for ex-convict services, was started at the same time as Isaac and Ben's investment company, simply called Isbekskin Investments. 3/4 of an hour later, Isaac got off the bus and walked another half hour before arriving at the garage. There he was joyfully greeted. "Doc, you're free. Welcome back. Would you like a drink?" Isaac smiled widely. "No, thanks. I need transportation. What do you have?" The man smiled happily back. "Ben already told us you were coming. I picked up a Nissan truck for you. Nice clean truck. Multi-person cab, low mileage, plenty of power, 4-wheel drive. It's over there." Isaac looked at the car, smiled and said, "It's perfect. I'll take it. How much is it?" The man looked shocked. "I can't charge you after everything you've done for me." "No, that won't work. I'll take a discount, but nothing for free, and no discussion." The man sighed. Ben predicted it. "We'll figure something out." While they were enjoying tea, Isaac was waiting for the paperwork for the car to be completed. A little later, he started the truck, familiarized himself with the controls and functions, and then went to visit his faithful friend. Late in the afternoon, he took a deep breath and settled into a comfortable chair. Turning to Anna, now Ben's wife, he said, "It's been a long time since I sat in a chair like this." Anna smiled at Isaac. She loved this man very much. Having accompanied her husband on many prison visits, she knew, as did her husband, that Isaac was innocent. She also noticed a lot of wear and tear on his face. Now there were many lines of worry on his face. While his eyes had previously been soft and light, they now had a sad but determined look. His face, hidden by his beard, was not as easy to read as before, when she could read him like an open book. However, his manners were still those of a gentleman, polite, cultured, and truly gentle. Isaac brought her flowers. He still remembered Ben and Anna's wedding day, although he was unable to attend it. She told Isaac that Ben could come over at any time and would bring Indonesian takeout food with him. They knew it was Isaac's absolute favorite food. Ben came in noisily. "What's that ugly sapphire blue truck sitting in my driveway?" He laughed, and the men hugged. "Welcome back, Isaac. I'm so glad to see you here." Isaac just nodded, suddenly unable to speak. Anna patted him on the back and said quietly, "It's okay. We understand. Take your time." Isaac shuddered. He shook his head to get rid of the gloomy thoughts and said, "It's a nice house. The spell has been broken. Isaac, what do you want to drink?" Beer? Isaac thought for a moment and replied, "No, just sparkling water. I haven't drank alcohol in 5.5 years. I'll try to keep it up." Anna started to serve dinner, but suddenly stopped with a tray of delicious-smelling food in front of two hungry men. She smiled and said, "Now that I have your undivided attention, I have something important for you. This evening is all about celebration. Tomorrow you will be able to rush into battle with the dragons again. Understood?" Both men agreed immediately. This was the signal for the start of a very pleasant evening. For the first time in almost 7 years, Isaac felt calm and relaxed. At the end of the evening, Ben informed Isaac that they had already prepared a guest room for him. Isaac felt a little embarrassed and said, "This is too much. I can stay at a hotel." Anna said in a tone that allowed no argument, "I insist. You will sleep here. Tomorrow you will probably want to visit your house. I don't think you should go there alone, so we will go with you. This is also not discussed." Isaac gave up. "I am in your debt. I am dead tired now. Please show me where I can lie down." Anna said in the same tone, "Are you crazy? We're your friends, you know. Remember this. You paid for a large part of this house with money from the traffic light project. Ben will show you where to go. Tomorrow is a new day." In a much softer voice, Anna said to Isaac, "Good night, you big fool. Don't forget that we love you too." Isaac didn't sleep well that night. The bed was too soft. It was too quiet. He missed K2's snoring and the noises of the prison, but eventually fell into a restless sleep. Lorenstad watched people arrive at the house at the end of the street. They arrived in 2 cars, stopped at the gate, and got out. 1 woman, 2 men. Because the FBI used her home as a surveillance point before the raid, she became wary of unfamiliar visitors to the home. She took out the binoculars that the FBI agents had forgotten to take away and looked carefully. 1 man and a beautiful woman were clearly very much in love. They waited until a thin, bearded man got out of his blue truck and looked around. She aimed the binoculars at his face, which was lined with wrinkles around his eyes. When he turned to look around, she got a good look at his eyes. She inhaled sharply. They were light brown and reflected a lot of pain. She also noticed that the couple looked at the man in his inappropriate clothing with a lot of sympathy. The 3 eventually made it through the gate and toward the front door before the lone man returned to his truck and grabbed a crowbar. It didn't take long before they entered the house. Laura put down her binoculars and prepared to pick up her little boy from school. Isaac walked through the ruins of what had been the interior of his home 6 years ago. Now everything seemed destroyed by what had happened here, that to Isaac it was just another building. The furniture was stained, worn and damaged to the point that it needed to be replaced. The kitchen was so dirty and ruined that it would have to be completely replaced. The bedrooms smelled disgusting. In fact, the entire house smelled like a public toilet, with some areas even worse than the prison. Electrical wires were cut or torn out, and the ceiling was destroyed to provide access to the main security system. All electronic devices, computers, and other valuables are missing, likely stolen. Isaac wondered if he would ever be able to make this home his own again. He walked outside and headed to his truck to get his things. The day before, he bought 3 folding chairs, a field bed, a sleeping bag, and other camping supplies such as a stove and so on. He also purchased toiletries and some basic clothing and towels. Taking with him what he could carry, Isaac began to drag things inside. When Laura returned with Timothy, her 10-year-old son, she was just in time to see Anna ask the sad man something. To the surprise of both women, it was at this moment that Isaac completely lost his composure. "It's okay, Isaac, it's okay. We're here to support you. Just talk it out. I'm here, talk it out." "We understand you," Ben said quietly to the distressed man and quietly whispered to Anna. He finally showed emotion. It took Isaac a long time to come to his senses again. Finally, he hugged his 2 friends and said, "Thank you. I don't know what I would do without you. I'm calm again. The way they treated the house was just unbearable. Anna, still very worried, asked, Isaac, it's time for us to go. Are you sure you want to stay here? Please come with us. Isaac chuckled. I'm good now. I need to buy a new phone and start doing business. This is my home, and I will make it my home again. Don't worry, I'll be fine. Now let's get down to business. What are your phone numbers? I only have Ben's work number. They both handed Isaac their business cards and walked silently to their car as Isaac walked back into the house. When they were almost in the car, Laura approached them. Good morning, I'm your neighbor. I apologize for the intrusion. Can I ask you something? Anna looked at the woman. She had a sweet face, despite the wrinkles from worry. She was slightly overweight, but still had curves and moved gracefully. Anna answered a little sharply, after all the emotions she had experienced in the last hours. You can ask, but I don't know if I can answer, or even want to. My name is Laura Winstad, and I live there with my 10-year-old son, Timothy. I would like to know if your friend will be okay. It's gotten pretty bad around here lately, so I'm worried about my boy's safety and mine. Ben laughed, but Anna responded, Laura, your neighborhood just got a lot better. No, Isaac is not okay, but he will be in time. Laura had not yet felt relief. So he's not dangerous. Sorry for asking, but it really was that bad here. Isaac? Dangerous? No, Laura. No matter what the rumors say. He's one of the kindest people I know and will probably be the best neighbor you'll ever have. With these words, Anna got into the car and drove away, leaving the puzzled woman behind. Isaac walked through his house. He noticed that the cables at the electrical panel had not been cut. Only the fuses had been pulled out, and the small black box hidden in the alcove above the door seemed to be intact. It was a box for the solar panels that powered his home security backup system. The remaining panels fed the external system, which in turn led to the downfall of Peter Ramsey. He headed to what had once been his office, but was now filled with trash, empty cardboard boxes, and more. His desk was still against the wall, covered in dirt. He frantically pushed everything aside and, with great effort, moved the table and lifted the baseboard. It opened to reveal the backup security system, flashing green. Isaac thought, she's still here. It turned out to be a very valuable hobby. Of course, if it still works. He was pretty sure they hadn't found any cameras or microphones. Otherwise, they would have trashed the house trying to find the system. Add a computer or laptop to the list, thought Isaac. Isaac never bothered with notes. His memory had never failed him. The afternoon was spent shopping. Telephone and operator, tablet and laptop. Computers would be purchased later because they could not be charged. Flash drives and a small generator for electricity. Solar panels could not supply all of his energy needs. He returned home with a truck full of things and dinner. When he finished dinner, he took out his phone and called Ben. Hey, Ben, it's Isaac. Do you have a pen and paper? Isaac gave Ben his cell phone number and new email address and asked for his list of ex-con companies. Within minutes, he had his answer. Ben could always predict Isaac's thoughts and prepared everything he needed in advance. The next morning, Laura looked out the window and saw her new neighbor sitting in the morning sun in a folding chair at a folding table with a laptop, talking on the phone. Laura did some research online and was confused again. A man spent 5.5 years in prison for beating and physically harming his wife and daughter. A person must have treated another very badly to deserve such punishment. But this man and woman told me he was harmless, thought Laura, who decided to play it safe. Today, she only had to take care of Timothy since, unfortunately for her, she only worked part-time. She would have liked more hours, but it was beyond her control. Her employer was very inflexible. She was having breakfast with Tim when a car pulled up to the house. On the side, it was written, Excom Services. Under him. We learned honesty the hard way. We now offer honest work at a fair price. Call and phone number. She saved it to check online when Tim was at school. The two men came out and greeted Isaac with smiles and handshakes. They had a thermos and a large bag. Isaac laughed, and they all went inside. Isaac noticed that his neighbor had been watching him the day before. Now he saw her looking again and thought to himself, rumors will soon fly. It might be better to wait with the introductions and begin to give the men instructions. I need to clean. Let's start with the kitchen, bedroom, and my office over there. Everything can be thrown out. If you find something and don't know what to do with it, just ask. That evening, a truck pulled up and emptied a 40-yard dumpster. After a while, Laura looked outside again and saw a minibus with a sign ex-con services. The woman came out, looked around, and gave instructions to the others. When she was done, she walked to the back of the van and picked up a large bouquet of flowers before walking up to Laura's front door and ringing the bell. Laura opened the door, and the woman handed her flowers and said, "With compliments from Dr. Isaac for the inconvenience. And if we're too loud, just tell us and we'll stop." The woman walked away, leaving Laura with her mouth open. Laura looked at the other house and saw Isaac sitting at the table by the front door. He looked at her and waved his hand. She picked up the flowers, waved back, and went inside to find a vase. She felt strangely excited. In 2 weeks, 2 containers later, the house was cleared of its past, and Isaac and a contractor completed plans to restore the interior. There was still a lot of work to do, although his bedroom and part of the kitchen were already usable. Isaac was sitting at his usual table near the door when it started to rain. He installed an awning next to his house so that when it started to rain, he took shelter under the awning because he loved the feeling of being outside and the smell of the forest. He was enjoying the sound of rain on the awning when he heard the dying car engine. Looking back, he saw Laura panicking. He took his umbrella and walked towards her. "Good afternoon. We have not yet been introduced. I am Isaac Manor, your neighbor, as you may have noticed," Isaac said with a slight smile to soften his words. Yeah, sorry, I'm in a hurry. I need to pick up Tim, my son, from school. I'm already late, and my car." "Your car isn't going anywhere by the sound of it. You can take mine if you want, or if you're not afraid of being seen with an ex-con, I can give you a ride." Laura was a little taken aback by Isaac's proposal. She quickly weighed the pros and cons and finally said, "I'm more afraid of driving your big truck. Could you give me a ride?" "Sure, grab your coat and sit down. I just need to lock up the house. Do you need help with the car?" Laura whispered quietly, ashamed, "I can't afford it. My ex." Isaac interrupted her before they left for school. "Neighbor, I said help. As in help. You know, help. No strings attached or strings attached. Just a friendly face and an occasional cup of coffee will do." Laura noticed his use of the word neighbor in his address to her and felt ashamed of herself. She said, "I'm Laura Wenstad. Sorry for being so rude. Yes, please, if you can fix it." The last words sounded partly hopeful, partly fearful. Isaac pressed the speed dial button on his phone and put it on speaker so Laura could listen too. "Doc," said a voice over the speakers, "how are you and how can I help you?" "Hey, Kate, I'm doing well. Oh, can you call Joey for me and have him check my neighbor's car? The keys are in the ignition. The car just died. We're picking up her boy." "Of course, Doc. Anything else?" "Just have Joey call me back when there's news, please." "I will, and by the way, did you know that K2 has to appear at a parole board meeting next week? Mr. Green already knows." Isaac laughed. "Thank you. Good to know. A new phase will begin soon. Looks like I'll need an assistant soon." Laura looked at Isaac, embarrassed. "When I try to make an appointment at a car repair shop, I have to wait at least a week. How and when can I get my car to the garage quickly?" "Don't worry about it. Joey's on his way with a tow truck, I guess." Are you their boss? Are they that quick to respond? No. I helped them set up their business. That's all. Don't tell me you haven't looked up information about me and estranged on the internet, or that you haven't heard rumors about me. But in reality, Ben Green is you. He was Matt, and I founded the investment company is Exxon and Exxon Services to help ex-prisoners start a new life. That's why I get a little extra help. Laura looked at the man in a new light. If only he hadn't hurt his ex-wife and daughter. Arriving at school, Laura got out of the car and waved when she saw Timothy waiting for her. Timothy's face lit up when he saw the car, and he shouted, "It's our neighbor's truck. Cool. Why is it here?" Laura Helpedto, the teen, got into the back seat and buckled him in as she said sadly, "Our car broke down. Again." Isaac turned around and said, "Hey, big guy, I'm Isaac. If your mom doesn't mind, you can call me that too. Now let's go home." Once home, Joey pulled Isaac aside. "Doc, this car is a real death trap. The engine is burned out, but the rest is even worse. What do we do?" Isaac thought about Laura's words and asked, "She can't do without a car. Do you have anything suitable?" "I have a nice little Nissan Rogue, but the color is terrible." "She can take it. Should I ask her?" "No, just take this one and change it. Send me the bill. I can't let my neighbors or their children die." Joey walked up to Laura and said, "Excuse me, madam. I need to pick up your car and papers, please." Laura was on the verge of tears. "I need this car. I can't pay for repairs." "Don't worry, madam. Doc has already sorted everything out. I'll bring a replacement this evening." Laura stammered, "Isaac took care of this. Can he pay for it? Does he always do this? And please call me Laura." "You have no idea, Laura. He is one of the nicest people I know, honest, smart, and generous, and I know where this conversation is going." "No, Laura, he never asks for anything in return. It's better not to start like that at all. With him because he thinks it's an insult. That's why everyone is trying to help him with the work he needs. He'll pay anyway, whether you want it or not, and a lot of people owe him something." He paused for a second before adding, "Oh yeah, and by the way, I don't believe for a second that he beat his ex-wife and daughter. I saw him train in prison. He just doesn't have it in him. Sorry, Laura. See you after dinner." Meanwhile, Isaac finally found the strength to access the backup hard drives. Connecting them to his laptop, he began to check how long they had been running. The first recording began immediately after he installed and activated the entire installation. He watched silently as his wife broke her vows of marriage. A few weeks later, he saw in the tapes his discovery and subsequent threatening discussion, after which he left, and Ramsey arrived an hour later. What happened next was something that almost opened the gates of hell again. Ramsey calmly explained the plan to force Isaac into submission. They will put on makeup as if they have been beaten. Lydia was to report to the police that they had been beaten and injured, and Ramsey would take care of the rest. He will persuade Isaac to comply, and Lydia will withdraw the statement later. This was followed by footage of a makeup artist doing his job and someone called Doc signing some paperwork. Isaac sat in silence as tears streamed down his face. He felt terribly betrayed. He suddenly lost his breath and quickly rewound the notes. He stopped when he saw Ramsey again, sitting in the house, which had already begun to fall into disrepair. Something in the body language of the men, including the prosecutor and the judge, made him replay that part. He heard Ramsey say, "No, this man has become a threat. He must be stopped so he can no longer speak. Forever." At this point, Isaac stopped watching. He turned off the hard drives and called the woman from the FBI. It took a while, but when he finally got through and explained what he had seen, they arrived very quickly. Isaac had already packed 2 discs and told the woman, "I need a certified copy of the recordings of these dates." He handed her a dated note and continued, These notes show that I have been slandered and imprisoned despite my innocence. I am going to settle some accounts." Lydia was busy. She worked as a legal secretary for the prosecutor, a job that Peter arranged for. She survived the whole mess because she stopped seeing Peter shortly before he was arrested. She felt some guilt towards Isaac, but if Isaac had just given up, since she had taken an oath in court, there was no way to retreat, and because of this, she had already paid a heavy price. Her daughter barely spoke to her because of this and the fact that she was forced to cooperate. She had just finished the letter when the prosecutor and the woman entered the office. "Lydia, could you come into my office for a minute?" When she entered the prosecutor's office, the woman said, "Please close the door and sit down." A large TV was installed in front of them. The woman introduced herself as Agent Smith from the FBI and showed her credentials. She sat down and said, "We are resuming the case of Isaac Manor." Lydia turned pale. A heavy lump formed in her stomach. "And this is necessary. Why?" Agent Smith continued, "I think you know why we're here, don't you?" "And no, why?" asked the now seriously nervous Lydia. "I'll show you a few examples of why," was the dry reply, and the big screen lit up. Lydia saw herself sitting with Peter Ramsday and heard them plotting to slander Isaac. She fainted. When she came to, there was great commotion around. She opened her eyes and noticed that she was lying on the floor. Not far away, the prosecutor was handcuffed. With contempt in her eyes, Agent Smith told him, "You think you can get away with it? Or that the judge and the warden will get away too? We have months of tapes, including a murder plot, of you all, and it's all completely legal. Because everything was recorded in the house, and the owner himself gave them to us." A week later, Lydia confessed. Ramsay was visited in his cell and formally charged with enough crimes that he would spend the rest of his life in prison. Isaac learned that Lydia had been convicted of false reporting to the police and perjury. He quietly made it clear that he would be unhappy with any action that might happen to the mother of his former daughter, as it would leave her without a family. He went to Ben and said that he wanted to scare Lydia as retribution. Ben got to work. He said it wouldn't bring in much, but he was going to sue Lydia for $100,000 for every year Isaac spent in prison. Ramsay was about to be deprived of his family fortune. He was sued for $1 million for each year Isaac was imprisoned, as well as for damage to his home and the environment. A lawsuit has also been filed against the city of Denz for its part in the unjustified imprisonment. The city authorities settled the matter very quickly. Ramsay, with his inflated ego, thought that the lawsuit would have no consequences. His lawyer did his job, but spent as little effort on the case as possible. He's tired of dealing with the ex-sheriff's demands. As a result, the court decided that Isaac's claim was justified, and the sheriff was deprived of his fortune. This helped because the money went into a trust fund for Isaac and Ben's investment company, ISPCOM. Lydia was really scared of Isaac's lawsuit. She was in prison. She no longer had a job. Her house was about to be repossessed for failure to pay the mortgage. And where would she find $550,000? She was not abused or otherwise harmed in prison. It was worse in its own way. She was completely ignored by her fellow inmates. They turned away when she tried to speak. She had a separate cell because no one wanted to be near her, and they preferred to sleep on the floor somewhere else. Lydia had heard talk of an investment program, and when she asked what it was about, one of the guards cynically replied that many prisoners owed her money for putting her ex-husband in prison. Otherwise, Funds Beacon would never have been created. In her misery, she forgot about it again. Shortly after Ramsay learned that Isaac had been awarded $55 million and another $500,000 for renovations, he screamed that he was going to kill Isaac. Less than a week had passed before visitors came to him again at night. This time they were not so soft. Isaac has been out of prison for a year now. K2 joined him in freedom and they became close friends. Isaac's house was completely restored to its former splendor. However, the decorations remained minimal. Meanwhile, he quietly bought all the houses that were for sale in the cul-de-sac. That night he went to bed, but a few minutes later he had to close the window because of a terrible storm that began outside. He looked out, shook his head, and looked again. He saw Laura and Tim huddled in the doorway, wet and shivering. He got angry. He took 2 raincoats, sometimes used by workers, and ran downstairs, not paying attention to the fact that "What are you up to?" he shouted. "You will freeze to death. Here, pull this on and go up into the house." Laura initially wanted to refuse, but after looking at Isaac, she decided to do otherwise. When they were safe in Isaac's house, she looked down at the floor in embarrassment and said quietly, "I'm sorry. I panicked and didn't think." Isaac immediately calmed down and answered softly, "Sorry for shouting. This is a reaction to concern for people." "What happened?" "The electrical panel exploded." "Okay, someone will take a look tomorrow. You can stay here tonight. I'll change the bed for you and Tim to sleep in. I'll sleep on the cot. Tomorrow we will deal with your house. And please, no objections." Isaac found some t-shirts and showed Laura the bathroom, telling her and Tim to take a hot shower. He set up his flip phone in the office to rest when he heard a quiet noise. He turned around and saw Laura standing in the doorway. In an instant, he noticed her beautiful figure. To hide his embarrassment, he asked a little rudely, "Do you need something? How can I help you?" "Yes, you big idiot. I need to thank you. So can I kiss you goodnight?" Laura said, blushing. She kissed Isaac on the cheek and asked, "Why the hell did your ex leave you? And why did she treat you so badly?" "I don't know. Anyway, I put it behind me knowing she was behind bars." Laura sat up abruptly, and this did not go unnoticed. Isaac stood up and said, "I'm willing to tell you the short version of the story, but you need to dress more modestly. You'll find my robe next to the door in the bedroom." Laura blushed and ran away, this time showing her buttocks and legs. A few moments later she returned, much more decently dressed. Isaac told her that he designed and installed backup security systems as a hobby, and that he hid them so well that criminals never found them. The external system was accessible via the internet, which is exactly what happened in the prison and caused the downfall of the illegal trade and the sheriff. The other system was hidden in the house and not accessible to Isaac, and to be honest, he thought it was destroyed and didn't worry about anything until he saw that his office was practically untouched and was only used as a dumping ground. "On the hard drives, among other things, I found evidence of my innocence," he finished. When he finished, he sent Laura to bed. A busy day awaits them tomorrow. The next morning, a contractor came to inspect the damage to Laura's house. K2 came with him, so Isaac introduced Laura to Fabian. Her small hand completely disappeared into his large palm. Then Timothy came up, and they also shook hands. Fabian pulled his knees up and said, "Careful, it hurts. You're stronger than you think." The ice was broken. They went inside for coffee, where Fabian whispered to Laura, "Don't drink his coffee without water." Laura laughed in response. "I know. This morning I perked up because of what he calls coffee." The contractor returned with bad news. Laura's house was almost uninhabitable due to its neglect. Laura started crying. Isaac got straight to the point. "K2, can you install a lock on my bedroom and give Laura the keys?" He looked at Laura and asked, "Who is your landlord?" "My ex," Laura sobbed, "and he doesn't want to sell me the house." Isaac turned to K2. "Take care of that too, okay? Nice, and evaluate first before bidding him." Laura asked in surprise, "Why a castle?" "Because according to the neighbors, I still beat up women. How late do you have to work?" "Today I don't need to work. They pay me pennies, but they want 150% from me. With this salary, I can barely make ends meet and can't find another job, again because of my ex." "What is your job?" "I studied organization and business. I specialized in both. and now I work as a secretary in a pool with other secretaries who are willing to provide more services. Isaac realized instantly. He became very fond of this woman who tried her best to take care of her son, constantly blowing up her ex-husband, and he needed a secretary. His workload was growing rapidly, and he wanted more time to himself, so he asked, "I need a full-time assistant. The work is becoming more than I can manage, and if I'm not careful, I'll become a prisoner of my own trust. Would you like to work for me here in this house, or even from your own house when it's renovated?" Laura blushed and felt warm. She stammered, "I have no references, and I need to be able to take care of Timothy." Feeling Laura hesitate, he added another argument. "If you work from this house, I will set up a room for Tim, his own little office, and when necessary, I will help him with his homework." Isaac was silent for a minute, and then said softly, "Go ahead, make up your mind. It will free you, and it will benefit me too. It will be nice for me to work with someone I already know and like." "Do you like me?" Laura asked, very surprised. "Why not? If you were just a roommate, you'd be sitting in a long-term rental room right now. Now please say yes. Anna and Ben will discuss the rest with you." Laura threw herself into Isaac's arms, giving him a kiss on the cheek. "When do I start?" "Now. I suddenly have a desire to decorate my house and much more. You will stay here while you renovate your house, I hope." "Yes, and Timothy will be delighted too. But first I need to quit my old job. Can I use your phone?" Meanwhile, Timothy discovered an old robot that Isaac had made as a hobby. It was one of the few things they found intact in the house. He ran with it in his hands to Isaac. Tim exclaimed, "What is this? Who built this?" Isaac smiled happily at the boy as he replied, "I did that. Let's find some batteries and a remote control so you can play with it outside." 10 minutes later, the little robot was rolling down the driveway to the joyful cries of an 11-year-old boy. While he was doing this, Isaac arranged for a babysitter for Tim, and an hour later he and Laura went to a large shopping mall. "I quit. They weren't happy and offered me a promotion and more work," Laura said. "Ha," Isaac responded as he maneuvered into the parking lot. "I hope it's too late. What did they offer?" Laura looked at the man next to her and noticed the worry in his eyes. She thought, he really cares. She felt warm, and for the first time in a long time, she spontaneously felt a little horny. Laura decided to tease a little and asked, "What do you have to offer?" Isaac was not taken aback. "You will start with $4,000 a month in hand, free housing, and my eternal gratitude." "Deal," Laura exclaimed happily. "But free housing? You haven't bought a house yet." Don't underestimate Fabian's negotiation skills. And no, he will actually ask politely. After 2 weeks, Laura was amazed at how quickly and efficiently the ex-conv crews worked. She had already begun moving some of her belongings back to her now free home, but she did so with some sadness. Laura became increasingly attached to the sometimes gloomy man. Their working relationship was firmly established. Their day began with an hour of cardio and workouts. It was a routine that Isaac adopted in prison under Fabian's guidance that got him into very good shape, and he wanted to stay that way. Laura had difficulty coping with the workouts at first, but was already noticing a difference in her condition. The work, she found, was sometimes difficult, but like training, she learned to cope with it. A few nights later, Tim announced that he had a new math teacher. Laura didn't think much of it, only half listening to his happy talk. She was thinking about Isaac and how she could show her feelings for him when she noticed a car in her driveway. She wasn't expecting guests, so she watched for a while. The driver didn't come out, but then her attention was diverted by Timothy, who was enthusiastically talking about how he was assembling his robot with the help of Isaac, of course. Half an hour later, she looked again and saw that the car was still there, the driver still sitting inside. Laura became curious as to why this was and went outside to find out, going to the driver's door and knocking on the window. Thomasina Manor, also known as Tommy, got a job as a math teacher at a school in the area where she used to live. When her mother was sentenced to prison, including for perjury, Tommy had to interrupt her studies in artificial intelligence and get a job. That's where she heard him talking enthusiastically about the construction work, and she felt a pang of jealousy. She did this with her father before her mother went crazy and got involved with that freak. Later that day, as she was writing invitations to a parent-teacher meeting, she looked up Tim's address and her world turned upside down. Could it be my father helping Tim? Did my dad return to that house after everything that happened there? She thought. She needed to find out. An hour later, she sat in her car with small binoculars, watching her father sit in front of his house. She was struck by how older he looked than the last time she saw him when she said goodbye to school. She could not hold back her tears, but was afraid to approach him. Her mother once wrote Isaac a letter after his release, begging for forgiveness and asking if they could be friends in the future. Isaac's answer came through his lawyer to her lawyer. Only if you give me back 5.5 years of my life. Otherwise, stay away. Suddenly, there was a knock on the window. Tommy looked out of fear from behind her thoughts and, tearful, lowered the window. The woman looked at her and said, "You're clearly not okay. Go inside to calm down a little. You're in no condition to drive right now." Tommy, confused, allowed the woman to lead him inside. Tim met her there. "Hello, Miss Tommy. Why did you come to visit us?" Laura was stunned, but maintained her composure. "I'm Laura Wenstad. Who are you?" "Thomasina Manor. I teach Tim math. Please call me Tommy." Laura's head clicked. "Manor? You mean?" Tommy nodded and said sadly, "Yes, he is my father. I haven't seen him for more than 6 years," and slowly sank to the floor. Laura picked her up and sat her down on the sofa. She asked Tim to get some water and then added, "Tim, please go to your room. We need to talk." Tim left immediately and Laura turned to Tommy. "We need to talk. But first, you're in no condition to drive, so you'll stay here for the night. If I learned anything from your father, it's to help when needed." Tommy sighed with relief. Now she finally had someone to talk to, even if it was a stranger. She looked at Laura with a questioning look, and Laura understood her unspoken question. She said, "I know almost everything. The only thing your father never mentioned was your role in all of this, only that you were adopted by Peter Ramsay." Tommy shook her head decisively. "I was never adopted. I refused, and in the end they gave up. When I realized what they did to my father, I stopped talking to my mother, and when that bastard tried to enter my room without knocking while I was getting dressed, I hit him. I left that house when I turned 18. I could no longer call it home. Soon after that, the bastard and my mother broke up." Laura digested this information. Isaac was sure that his daughter was adopted. She said after a while, "I think we need to find a way to convince your father to let you back into his life. I want him to be as happy as he can be. You know, he still has a photo of you in desk drawer." The tone in which Laura delivered her speech made Tommy look at her carefully, realizing the truth. Tommy touched Laura's hand and said lightly, "We haven't known each other for long, but one thing is absolutely clear to me. You love him, don't you?" Devastated, Laura blushed and answered with sadness in her voice, "Yes, but I don't know if I have a chance with him. Maybe I can help you if I tell you what I know about my dad from my experiences and from what my mom told me before she had a brain breakdown because of that bastard sheriff." "Are you really ready to help?" Laura asked, barely containing her emotions. "My mother once told me that under this shell and bragging there is a very shy man who in no way wants to impose himself on a woman. The more he loves her, the more he keeps his distance." Laura suddenly perked up. "Really? Is he attentive? Do you suddenly find flowers on your table? Tim told me you were out shopping. Have you looked at something in a store that you liked and suddenly it was delivered the next day?" Laura could only confirm all this. "He loves you. Don't worry. My mother also told me that she had to go after him quite aggressively. Please take care of my father. I desperately want him to be happy. I want to see him so badly so I can try, but I don't have these 5 years for him. That was his demand, to give him back his 5 years of life. Tommy's tears threatened to flow again. Laura had a very bad night. After a very emotional evening, a stranger slept in her house and told her how the man she had fallen in love with felt. Now that she understood a little about how Isaac worked, she needed to find a way to break through his shield. She tried to come up with a plan, thinking of several scenarios but dismissing them just as quickly. Eventually, she decided to start dressing sexier. At that moment, she also did not understand how she could reunite father and daughter. Isaac was already training when Laura entered his small gym. He looked pleasantly surprised. While her usual sweatpants were still in place, her loose shirt had been replaced with a crop top that showed off her cleavage. Taking a closer look at her, he noticed that she had lost a little weight. Halfway through the training session, Laura decided to test Tommy's claim. She needed sexier clothes anyway, so she asked, "Isaac, can I have the day off? We are working at full capacity. I need to relax a little, and I need some new clothes, so I'd like to go shopping today. Tim is at school until 5. Isaac exclaimed enthusiastically, "That's a good idea. Do you mind if I join you? I would also like to spend a day away from the office." This was exactly what Laura wanted to hear, but she pretended not to think about it. She noticed that Isaac's face immediately changed from happy to somewhat worried, so she quickly said, "I would really like that. A little friendly company. You can help me choose." "Are you sure? I won't be mad at you if you want to go alone. You know, I'm also your employer," Isaac said, giving her the excuse. "Yes, but you are also a dear friend," she replied before lightly kissing his cheek. "But there is one hard rule." "Eh? What's the rule?" "No talk about work," Laura replied with a slight smirk. Seeing Isaac's smile, mission complete, Laura thought joyfully, "Now let's finish this training." "Yes, boss," Isaac joked. An hour later, the three of them were driving first to Tim's school and, after dropping Tim off, to the shopping center. They arrived early, so Isaac and Laura leisurely drank coffee before doing their shopping for Isaac. Laura firmly told him that he needed to give up his convict image and start wearing clothes that would show him off in a better light. After Isaac was secured, Laura's fun began. She teased Isaac mercilessly, starting at the lingerie store. She lost what she called mom fat, and it transformed her breasts from a slightly sagging D cup to a firmer but smaller C cup that went well with her improving figure. Her waist was smaller, and so were her buttocks, but they were much firmer and more defined, and her legs were now toned and smooth. Additionally, since she didn't have to worry as much about getting through the week financially, she became more confident and calm. Turning sideways, she admired her new image in the dressing room mirror and smiled. Part of the smile was because she had deliberately left the curtains partly open so Isaac could take a look, and his red face told her that he had done so. After that, she tried on several dresses and one set of underwear. In one dress, her breasts were pushed up a little, so that the neckline became deeper, and she noticed Isaac took notice. She was singing inside. Another dress that she thought was really pretty, but was out of her budget. With a sigh, she returned it to the counter. Then she went to the sportswear department and completely did not notice Isaac's gesture towards the saleswoman. After lunch, they argued amicably about who would pay the bill. Of course, Laura lost. When they returned to the car, loaded with bags and boxes, Laura never noticed the extra bag between the rest of her purchases, along with a bottle of her favorite perfume. At home, Laura unpacked her things and found the things she had bought. Tommy was great. She felt herself getting warm. "I really have a chance," she thought. The next day, she showed up at the gym wearing a different top, but this time in tight leggings. In the mirror, she saw Hawasak watching her every time it seemed to him that she was not looking. He peeked, but did not even hint at movement. On the third day, she was in despair. As the training neared the end, her reddened eyes filled with tears. Isaac looked at her face and immediately stood next to her, asking, "What's the matter, Laura? You are crying. Is there anything I can do to help?" For pennies, for pounds, Laura thought. Here it is. I have a problem with a man. What? Is he hurting you? In a way. The problem is that I love him. I'm actually in love with him. Laura saw Isaac swallow his saliva and turn pale, but continued. The thing is, he doesn't respond to my advances. Now I don't know what to do. Do you have any ideas? Isaac stammered. Laura, you've come to the wrong place for advice. But, I'll try. If this man is so stubborn, then he needs to be hit over the head. He'd be extremely stupid to ignore you. You're smart and beautiful. You have a big heart. Be as straightforward as possible. He will come to his senses. Isaac and Laura were sitting on the sports bench. Laura stood up, turned to Isaac, and sat on his lap so that he could not leave. Blushing, she said, "I'll be as frank as possible." She took a deep breath. Isaac, are you going to make love to me here or in your bed? To say that Isaac was confused was an understatement. He stuttered. What? You? You mean me? Yes, you. Fool. You. Laura, are you in love with me? Seriously? Her nod and smile made him smile back as he realized the truth. Oh, this makes me so happy. Laura, please believe me, I love you too. I've been in love with you since you sat dirty on your doorstep. So why didn't you tell me? You're stupid. She said this with affection. I couldn't. I'm your employer and I'm your landlord. Laura, when I first helped you, I promised. No strings attached, no returns. Just a friendly face and an occasional cup of coffee is enough. Do you remember? Laura kissed him. Sometimes you're too decent for your own good. Now that that problem is solved, the question remains, here or in the bedroom. Isaac took her hand, led her into the bedroom, and closed the door behind him. Isaac, it's time to pick Tim up from school, so one of us needs to go take a shower. Why don't we take a shower together? Isaac suggested lazily. Oh no, if you get in the shower with me, we'll never make it in time to get Tim. I'll shower first and go get Tim. Isaac didn't like it very much, but needs must be met when it comes time to act. Laura took a shower, got dressed, and went to her car. When she arrived at school, Tim was already waiting with Tommy. She walked over and sent Tim into the car. Tommy smirked slightly and spoke. It seems you have found your man, or vice versa. You were just walking a little funny. Laura laughed loudly and said, Thank you for the little information about your father. You were so right. I almost had to drag him to bed. After a short silence, Sorry, Tommy, I don't know what your mother was thinking when she allowed herself to be seduced by that Ramsay. Your father is a wizard. Now I promise to reintroduce you into your father's life. But please be patient. He is extremely sensitive on this topic. Laura's window of opportunity opened 6 weeks later. As usual, they played sports in the morning, but Laura didn't have the strength, and it was taking its toll. Isaac began to watch her more closely. Later that morning, she refused a cup of coffee, saying she preferred tea, and when someone walked by with a cheddar sandwich, she had to rush to the bathroom. Seeing this, Isaac understood enough. When Laura returned from a surprise visit, he told her to take the day off because he still had to go see a client, even though the latter was a big lie. As soon as Laura disappeared into her house, he drove his car to a shopping center where there was a good jeweler. The next morning, Laura felt a little better, but refused to train, saying she had a virus. She went to bed and arrived at her office at 9:30. She expected Isaac to be at the table, but someone told her that he was in the workshop. Strange. He always goes there in the afternoon, and he didn't even say hello. What's going on here? She thought and went to her desk. On her desk, she found 2 small boxes with numbers 1 and 2. She opened number 1 and found a beautiful antique pocket watch with a gold chain. There was a note under the clock. She unfolded the paper and read it. Time flies and life is too short to waste. An employer wonders if his personal assistant allows him to make her an offer. He thinks she is beautiful inside and out, and that over time she will become even more beautiful. Over time. Laura felt warm inside. With trembling hands, she opened the second gift. Inside, she found 3 different tests. She could definitely feel the heat running through her body now. Pregnant, and Isaac noticed it first. They completely forgot about protection. She thought warmly, he seems to accept it, perhaps even be happy about it. Laura was still confused, and her thoughts were racing in different directions. Happiness, anxiety, surprise, all of this fought for dominance in her mind. She stood there until she heard a quiet cough. She turned around and saw Isaac standing in the doorway. She blushed again, this time deep down to her neckline. Speaking modestly, she said, "Yes, my employer can make an offer." Silently, he took her hand and led her outside. There, in the sun, he asked loudly and clearly, "Laurenstad, will you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" "Yes, you are a fool. You didn't have to ask formally. I would say yes either way." Then she realized that about 100 men and women had witnessed this small scene. There was now loud applause and cheers as he gently placed the emerald-shaped palladium diamond wedding ring on her finger. "Oh my God," she exclaimed, "this is wonderful." Tim came over with a bottle of champagne and 2 glasses. Isaac told the bride-to-be, "I bet on yes, as you can see." Isaac then turned to the others and shouted, "Everyone here can take a glass from the garden." When the celebration was over, Isaac and Laura went into Isaac's house. Laura was tired of all the emotions, congratulations and handshakes. They sat comfortably in the living room and looked out the large window at the forest. After sitting there in silence, enjoying each other's company, Isaac asked, "Where do you want to live? Can you live here, on the ruins of my former life? Do we need to build a new house? This house still needs major renovations, especially if you're pregnant. What do you want to do with your old house?" "That's a lot of questions. I like this house. It is spacious, bright, and for me is associated with many happy memories. If I can participate in the renovation, let's stay here, please. As for my old house, it's yours, so why ask me? When Fabian bought it, I decided to re-register the documents in your name. So now it's up to you. But I would not like to introduce an unknown factor. That's why I'm asking if you know anyone or if anyone wants to live there. If you want to sell it, I'll just buy it from you, and you still have to decide." Isaac smiled. Big chance flashed through Laura's head. But you need to tread carefully. Isaac would agree to anything without hesitation now. If she asked him to jump off a cliff at this moment, he would do it without hesitation. You don't want him to feel manipulated, right? Maintaining an outward calm despite the emotions raging inside, she replied, "I need to think. Perhaps I know someone." The next day after school, Tim was free, so Isaac and Laura decided to go for an early lunch, pick up Tim, and head to the park. Isaac discussed changes he wanted to make to the house and surrounding area. He wanted to add a pool with massage jets for relaxation or serious swimming, and a balcony with doors to the master bedroom. He suggested building an extension to Tim's house, first with a door to the main house and later with its own entrance. There were other ideas, but nothing drastic. After finishing, Isaac asked if Laura had already found a candidate for her house. Laura nodded yes and took a deep breath. "Yes, I have a candidacy, and I really don't want to offer it to you. Can you promise to listen to me first? Think about it and only then answer. Please trust me on this." Isaac immediately felt uneasy, but replied, "Yes, I can do it. I'll listen first, think about it, and promise not to react hotly, although I suspect I won't like it." Laura replied, "I think that if you can step over your shadow, you will like it and make you very happy. Well, that's all." You know that Tim has a new math teacher, right? And he's very pleased with her. Isaac just nodded. She desperately needs a place to live. The house she lives in now has been taken over by the bank, and she needs to move out within 2 weeks. Isaac asked, "What's the problem?" Her name is Thomasina Manor, and I emphasize Manor, not Ramsay, as you always thought. Isaac was stunned into silence. He couldn't make a sound. Finally, almost exploding, "What?" Laura chimed in, "You promised." "You're right," he muttered. Laura took Isaac's hands and began to explain in a soft voice. She never knew what they did to you. She thought that the makeup artist was working on his portfolio. Her testimony was distorted by Ramsay. Every time she contacted the authorities with a complaint and wanted to see you and free you, she was denied because of Ramsay. The judge was on his payroll, and before your sentence, even your ex-wife thought it was just a way to put pressure on you. And by the way, Tommy hit Ramsay. I checked her story. Through Fabian. Last night, he confirmed everything. As Laura told the story, Isaac's face went through a spectrum of colors, red, purple, and pale, and when she finished, he was as white as a sheet. She shook his hands, looked into his face, and saw tears running down his cheeks. Isaac whispered, "Poor girl. So what do we do now?" His mind was a mess. He could only think, almost 7 years lost. Laura kissed him tenderly and lovingly, snapping Isaac out of his personal hell. Finally, he came to his senses. Ramsay will pay for this, and it will be a very big bill. Please don't do anything stupid. I don't want the father of our child. Yes, all 3 tests were positive. That's another thing I wanted to tell you. I don't want the father of our child to be in prison again. That won't happen. I won't do anything illegal to that scoundrel. But what should we do with Tommy? Leave it to me. Can you take an Uber home? I can do better. The contractor will take me back. He still needs to start drawing up estimates for work on the house. If you agree with them. Laura smiled. Your ideas sound great. I trust you completely. Now I'll go get Tim and Tommy. When she arrived at school, Tim was already running towards her, and Laura whispered, "Can you call Miss Manor?" Tim ran off again and returned a moment later with Tommy, who looked a little worried. To relieve the tension, Laura smiled as joyfully as possible and exclaimed, "I have a home for you." "Really? And I can pay for it?" Laura replied, "Oh, yes. Easy. Get in the car and we'll go take a look." Now? Yeah, why not? Tommy made up her mind. She couldn't help but trust this woman and got into the car. Laura took me home. When Tommy saw Laura's house, she was confused. After Tim rushed inside, Laura said, "Here is your new home." Tommy was completely dumbfounded. "Like this? This is your home." "No, I'm getting married. And you can afford it. Seriously. You just need to meet the owner." Tommy became wary. "I'm not going to sleep with him," she exclaimed. Laura laughed loudly. "No, honey, he won't even think about it." Tommy was still confused. She asked, "When can I meet your mystery landlord, and when can I move in?" Laura beamed as she said, "Now and tomorrow. As for now, we just need to go to the house nearby. By the way, Tim and I and the baby will also live there." Finally, Tommy got it. Laura watched with pleasure the expressions on Tommy's face. The mouth is open, the mouth is closed. It is opened again to make an incomprehensible sound. She alternately turned pale and red, and finally managed to mutter, My. Your father? Yes, and he really wants to meet you. We will get married because we will have a little brother or sister," Laura exclaimed happily. Tommy felt many emotions. She was thrilled to have a proper place to live, excited to see her father, and surprised to be a big sister. Moreover, she was full of fears because she did not know what to tell her father. In the almost 7 years of his absence, she had composed entire speeches and dreamed up scenarios for their reunion, but now she could not remember any of them. Laura took Tommy's hand and thus literally pushed her towards what she now called the main house. Tim ran forward and knocked loudly on the door, as he always did. Isaac opened it and asked hesitantly, "Hey, big guy, you are alone?" Tim answered cheerfully, "No, Mom came with my math teacher. She will live in our house." "Isn't it?" Isaac looked at the two women and said, "Oh, wow, this is truly a sight to behold. Two of the most beautiful and important women in my life, standing next to each other." When the women approached the threshold, he whispered quietly, his voice trembling, "Tommy, you have become such a beautiful woman. Can I hug you?" Tommy literally flew into his arms, sobbing, "Daddy." They stood for a long time, enjoying the moment, until Laura called them inside. Once inside, Tommy took a close look at her father. He has changed a lot. In fact, he looked much older than through binoculars. This was expected, but it seemed that he had aged more than 7 years. His face was furrowed, especially around his eyes, giving him a melancholic appearance. She remembered that her father always had a slightly full waist. Now she noticed that there was no trace of fat left, only skin, muscles, and bones. "Oh, Dad, I'm so sorry." Laura interrupted their tearful reunion. "Perhaps it would be better if you continue your acquaintance somewhere alone while I start preparing dinner. I'm guessing you'll stay for dinner too, Tommy?" Tommy walked up to Laura and hugged her tightly. "Thank you so much. I'm so happy now, and it's all thanks to you, Mom." Laura smiled through her tears. "I will do anything to make my Isaac happy. Now go talk to your father." Isaac and Tommy sat comfortably in the office, where one corner was furnished with comfortable chairs and coffee tables. Isaac offered Tommy a soft drink, saying, "There was alcohol in prison, but only the kind they made themselves. I never touched it, and when I came out, I decided that I could do without it. It doesn't bother me if others drink." Tommy nodded, saying, "I don't know where to start. Are you really offering me Laura's house? I see some difficulties." Isaac laughed softly. "I thought about that. The only problem that might arise is the restraining order she put out on me. I understand that she has no place to live after leaving prison, and you have plenty of space. Tommy, listen carefully. This is your home because you are Laura's tenant, and as such, I cannot prevent you from having guests, and I won't. But there is one but. Your mother must stay away from me. I don't want to see her in my garden or on my doorstep. She is not welcome here. I will ignore her if I see her on the street. If you can live with it." The rest was left unsaid. "I understand, Dad. This is only until she gets back on her feet. There are other reasons why I don't want Mom to live with me indefinitely." Isaac raised an eyebrow, but remained silent. Tommy took a deep breath and continued, "I have a boyfriend, and we're serious. I need space and privacy, and in fact, my mom and I haven't been getting along since she lost her way because of that scoundrel. I hope Mom finds a job and a place to live as soon as possible." Isaac picked up the mood and replied, "Is she still an accountant? Perhaps I can help her with her job. She should have enough money to pay her rent. I paid almost $500,000 to get rid of her. There should be something left of that." "No, Dad. She got ripped off by that scoundrel, and now he's completely broke. Last I heard, he spent his entire fortune on compensation payments. And yes, she's still a registered accountant and, after the scoundrel, also a legal advisor. Karma is a wicked thing. I'll see if I can't find her a job, but don't tell her that. I'm guessing you're visiting her in prison." Tommy nodded in response, and it was at that moment that Laura announced that dinner was ready. A few weeks later, Isaac and his daughter were talking in the study of a large house. He asked Tommy, "When was the last time you visited your mother?" "Right before I moved here, I think." "Remember, this is your mother. You only have one, so please keep in touch with her. You may be sorry if you don't." Before Tommy could respond, there was a loud knock on the door. Isaac said, "It's Fabian." only he knocks like that, and went to open the door. Tommy heard the giant's loud voice saying to Isaac, "Doc, may I introduce my son, Julian?" Hearing this, she ran out of the room to see Laura. Meanwhile, Fabian continued, "He makes me proud. Even though his father was in prison, he became a teacher. When he told me he wanted to meet you, I thought I'd like to see you too." Julian, his face red with embarrassment, stammered, "It's good to see you, sir. My father told me a lot about you, but actually, I came to ask you something." Okay, ask away." There was an awkward silence for a moment, during which Julian looked at his feet before saying, quietly, "Alone, please." Isaac led him into the office and found that Tommy had already left. He pointed Julian to a chair, and when he sat down, he asked, "How can I help you, Julian?" Julian quickly blurted out, "Sir, I want to ask Thomasina to marry me. We have loved each other for a long time, and I think it's time to make an honest woman out of her. With your blessing, that's why I came, sir, to ask for your blessing." Isaac smiled from ear to ear. He called, "Thomasina Manor, I know you're listening, so come out of hiding and introduce yourself." Tommy entered the office, smiling. "Yes, Dad. This dear young man wants to marry you and asks for my blessing. Should I give it?" "Yes, please, Dad. I'd really like that." Isaac stood up from his chair and extended his hand. "You have my blessing, son. Take care of my daughter. It's time to celebrate." Isaac followed Julian into the living room as Tommy held him back. "Dad?" "Yes, darling?" "Julian doesn't know yet. I'll tell him in a minute, but we're in a bit of a rush right now. You'll be a grandfather in about 7 months. The doctor confirmed it this morning." "Tommy, daughter, you make me so happy that I could burst. How about a double wedding? With Laura and me?" "That would be great. We can discuss it later after Fabian leaves." They walked into the living room, where Laura had a grin on her face and Fabian looked completely unaware of what was happening. As Isaac sat down, Julian said to Fabian with a big joyful smile, "Dad, let me introduce you to my future wife. This is Thomasina. Mr. Manor has just given us his blessing. Can we have yours too?" Fabian's face was a sight for the gods. He said, "Yes, of course, if that's what you want." Isaac hugged him. "Come on, big friend. Now we're becoming family, in more ways than one. Who would have thought, huh?" Across from them, Julian looked puzzled. "What?" Tommy said to Julian with a very happy face, "Yes, you will become a dad." Julian did a little dance of joy as Tommy explained to the others, "When we decided to stay together, we also decided that we wanted to have children while we were still young, so we stopped using protection." Julian's first salvo was a clean hit. "So, Mr. Small, you have a daughter and a grandson." 2 weeks later, Lydia sat in front of her daughter. "You look radiant, Tommy." "Yes, Mom. I have a place to live and I'm going to get married. Life has been kind to me." "Oh, that's wonderful. Where do you live and when is the wedding?" Tommy gave the address and enjoyed the look on her mother's face when she recognized it. "It's next to where Isaac used to live. How can you afford that?" "It's next to my dad. He still lives there. I found him and we were reunited." She asked her daughter, "Can I stay with you when I am released? I have nowhere to go. The house is sold. I need a new job too." Tommy took a deep breath. She didn't want Lydia to know that her father had already taken care of this job. She simply said, "You can come and live with me until the baby is born. I'll need a room by then. You talked about working with ex-con services. They specialize in helping convicts find work or business." "Your child, are you expecting a baby? Why didn't you tell me this? Judging by the way you talk to me, I understand that you are still angry with me. Can't you forgive me?" Tommy was stunned for a moment. "Is she really that heavy?" She replied, not holding back the anger in her voice, "Mom, it's only because Dad tells me that I only have one mother, and that I should keep in touch. Otherwise, the last time you would have seen me was when you went to prison. You cost me over 6 precious years with my father. And why? Because you were too selfish and too cowardly to do the right thing. And now we talk a lot with my dad's girlfriend about everything. I really don't understand that you fell in love with that idiot when you had my father. How could you do this? It's Lydia's turn to be stunned by such an onslaught. She was silent. It was obvious to her that she had some serious problems to settle with Tommy. Also shocking was that Isaac had a girlfriend. She never thought that Isaac could move on so quickly after being released. She also didn't expect him to leave and live in the house that brought him so much suffering. Knowing that it was trashed since she had gone there once after breaking up with Peter, she also wondered how he had so much money to fix it. As Tommy left and Lydia returned to her cell, Tommy's harsh words still echoed in her head. She left Peter almost immediately when it became obvious that she had been played and the money suddenly disappeared. He wanted Isaac out of the way, not only because he wanted her, but also because he wanted to find a place for his illegal activities. Lydia tried to be a good mother to Tommy and thought that Tommy's almost hostile behavior towards her was due to her maturing in years. She now realized how much she had hurt her little girl, who seemed to be much more attached to her father than she had ever thought. Tommy's words cut deep into her soul. Lydia was incredibly upset that Tommy was pregnant and didn't tell her right after she said she was getting married. Lydia realized that she had a very deep and wide gap to cross before Tommy would open up to her again. Lydia was sitting in her room at Tommy's house. It was not a warm welcome, but a welcome. Tommy didn't hug her, but at least she said, "Welcome back, Mom. You are our guest. May I introduce you to Julian Small, my future husband and the father of our child." The introductions took place and Tommy continued, "You are free to use everything in this house. While you are looking for a job, you can use the laptop I have placed in your room. Have you contacted estranged yet?" Lydia looked at her feet as she said, "I tried, but for some reason they were not interested in me. It seemed like I was banned." "I'll ask my father. Maybe he knows why you weren't contacted," Julian noted. He, among others, has the final say in hiring people through estranged services. He was also the one who knew on behalf of Isaac that you should be treated with respect and not harmed. Otherwise, it would be very difficult for you inside. Isaac is highly respected. What does your father have to do with my husband, ex-husband? Mom, I know what you're thinking. Do not even try. Dad doesn't want anything to do with you. Nothing, you understand. Tommy interrupted her angrily, phrasing it more as a command than a question. Julian continued the story about Isaac and Fabian. There was another piece of the puzzle for Lydia. That's why it was as easy as possible for her. She decided to rest for a while. But deep down, she wanted her life back with Isaac. Tommy knocked and told Lydia that she had a visitor. Frightened, Lydia fell. There was a giant man standing in the corridor. Julian was tall, but this man was the same height as her and twice as wide. The mountain turned around and introduced himself in a low, rumbling voice. "Good afternoon, I'm Fabian Small. Julian told me that you haven't received a response to your job request." "Right? I almost realized that everyone should avoid me like the plague." "You should have been avoided. It's right. Your association with Peter Ramsey has put you in danger. So I will speak a word in Isaac's name. He felt responsible. He was responsible for the evidence that ultimately sent you to prison. When Ramsey found out who provided evidence of his final demise, he threatened you and my future daughter-in-law. That's why we had to isolate you. Now I heard that you are looking for a job." "Yes, I was a registered accountant and worked as a paralegal for the prosecutor until we were both arrested." "Assistant lawyer, accountant. Good. I managed a company that deals with security and security systems. My company and fund, Uzbekistan Investments, are in need of an accountant. I can offer you a decent salary. We will hire you for a month, and after that, if you prove competent and compatible with our staff, You will receive a permanent contract, and we will provide you with housing for free. There is one condition. You should not try to contact Isaac in any way. I will be your immediate superior. Do you agree with this? I don't have a choice, do I? I agree. Of course you have a choice. You can refuse. Lydia was silent for a moment. She was stunned by how far Isaac kept himself from her, despite the fact that he was taking care of her immediate needs. She asked Fabian about it. The answer is simple. We try to provide for all ex-cons. The exception with you is that Isaac will have nothing to do with you, for obvious reasons. Lydia was shocked again, this time because of a direct, almost hostile response. She said in a trembling voice, I agree to the terms. Fabian didn't expect anything different, so he said, Okay, tomorrow you can come with Julian to our office to sign contracts and go through the HR department. We'll also arrange a small rental car for you. We have a garage that can be used by employees. A decent car for a reasonable price. But that's all for next month. With these words, Fabian said goodbye and left, leaving Lydia confused. She stood and wanted to go up to her room when she saw the binoculars. She took it and went upstairs, noticing how Fabian approached the door of Isaac's house and was warmly greeted by her ex-husband. She didn't have time to get a good look at Isaac, so she put the binoculars next to the window. She began making a list of demands to start her life over. It was almost dark when Lydia heard a car drive up the street. She wondered who it could be. Tommy and Julian were having dinner at a restaurant, so they couldn't come back so soon. She looked out the window and saw that the car had stopped in front of Isaac's door. The porch light turned on, and she saw Isaac get out of the car, and then saw a very pregnant woman with light curly hair, dressed in sweatpants and a tight t-shirt, hugging her ex-husband. Even through binoculars, one could see sparks jumping between them. She was jealous of this woman and felt terribly jealous, angry, and lost at the same time. It had to be her man, in her house. It took her a while to come to her senses. She realized that she was the reason it was the woman, and not her, who was in the porch light. Devastated, she sat down. Lydia realized that she had acted terribly stupidly, but perhaps there was still a way back to Isaac's heart. Tommy's wedding was fast approaching, with only 2 weeks left, and Lydia was trying to find out as much as she could about Isaac. Binoculars were helpful. She could see Isaac's face, his silver-streaked hair, his bearing, and his slender body. She saw him interact with the boy Timothy, right? She couldn't help but have another flash of envy. Isaac was so good with children. She tried to get Tommy to talk about Isaac's pregnant lover, but was constantly rebuffed. Neither Tommy, nor Julian, nor Fabian reacted to her penetrations. There was no direct answer to her questions either. The day before Tommy's wedding, she was informed that Isaac and Laura were also going to get married, and Lydia was amazed. She had been invited to Tommy's wedding and couldn't refuse to attend, but the thought of having to see her ex-husband's wedding was a direct blow to her ego. She was devastated. All hope of rekindling her relationship with Isaac had vanished. That girl was pregnant with Isaac's child. Why didn't she think of this before? She felt so stupid. Lydia turned and gave final instructions to the movers who were transporting her belongings to the house provided by Uzbekistan. Isaac made an exception for Lydia so that she could attend the wedding and subsequent celebration at his and Laurie's home. There was dinner, and after dinner, there was music and dancing. The dinner took place in a friendly atmosphere. The food was exceptional, and Lydia sat between 2 young men who engaged her in lively conversation about music and theater. When the dancing began, Lydia sat, lost and forgotten, in the corner, watching the fun. She was surprised that alcohol consumption was almost zero and traditional dancing began. Bride and groom, father of the bride with the bride, the mother of the bride with... She saw Julian looking at Isaac, who nodded slightly. Julian walked over and addressed Lydia. "Madam, may I invite you to this dance?" he asked politely. Lydia stood up, took his hand, and walked out onto the dance floor. There she felt her spirits lift as she loved to dance, but had not done so for many years, and Julian was a good partner. From the corner of her eye, she could see Tommy and Laura talking to Isaac, who looked worried. The dance with Julian ended, and she was about to go to her corner when she felt a light touch on her shoulder. She turned around and saw Isaac's face. At that moment, close, she noticed his eyes, sad and deep, which saw a lot of suffering. "Oh my God, what happened to him?" she thought. Suddenly, it became clear to her. I did this to him. What a scoundrel I am. Suddenly, she couldn't understand herself. How can she look at herself in the mirror now? In a moment of madness, she caused this man so much suffering and had the audacity to be jealous that he was able to get out of this hell that she created. In a matter of seconds, she lost all self-respect and confidence, physically shaking at the thought of what she had done to this man, just for some thrills with a real bad guy. Then she realized that Isaac was waiting patiently, his hand outstretched. "Excuse me, did you ask something?" she asked quietly. Isaac repeated, "May I invite you to this dance, Lydia?" Without a word, Lydia clung to Isaac and began to sob. After some time dancing, she calmed down a little. Using all her remaining strength, she whispered through her tears and said, "Isaac, I'm so sorry I did this. I know you must hate me. I'm sorry I can't give you back your years." Isaac replied, "Lydia, I'm glad you're showing remorse. So, we're dancing because the two women I love most have convinced me to have compassion for you. I've done you a little of what you've done me a lot. Sighs, and you felt a little of the pain that I experienced. I say a little. Ramsay's words, you explain the rules to him, and yours. Get over it or else, and the subsequent betrayal burned my soul. I hated you until I met Laura. She filled the void with her love, and any feelings she had for you evaporated. We dance here as strangers with a shared past. I won't avoid you anymore because of our daughter and soon-coming grandson, but it will be a long time before I can call you a friend. Keep in mind, I have two guards who will watch you like hawks with very sharp talons. They are not afraid to use them if you try to do anything they consider inappropriate towards me. Now let's enjoy the dance together." Lydia almost inhaled the touch of this man whom she had once forgotten that she loved. It felt different. In times past, he had seemed a little soft to the touch, but now his shoulders felt bony and hard. His stance and movements showed strength and endurance. She remembered how skillful he was in bed, and was again surprised at her own stupidity. It was only because it was so exciting, and because of the dizzying power play when Isaac caught them together, that she remained in Ramsay's clutches. Now she was paying a high and terrible price. Instead of helping her daughter on this most beautiful day of her life, she barely behaved like a guest. The father's fiancée instead acted as her daughter's mother. They were so close, Lydia noted. Asking Julian to dance should have been as natural as breathing, but it required Isaac's permission. Both his wife and her daughter had to tell Isaac to step over his shadow. Depression fell over her like an evening shadow in a gorge, sharply defined, inevitable, and heralding a long, cold night. She shuddered and clung to the man she had betrayed and lost. In Isaac's arms, she mourned all that she had thrown away. Isaac witnessed the fall of what was once a proud and beautiful woman into a broken, insecure person. He finished. Now she had to fight to return, just as he fought. He quietly said in her ear, "There are people who will help and support you. I have provided you with the basics. The rest is up to you." The dance is over. Tommy walked over and said, "I can see this has been very emotional for you. Do you want to stay the night? I don't think you should drive right now. I don't want to lose my mom. Or should I arrange for you to come home?" Lydia accepted the offer to return to her new home, and Ben and Anna drove her. Before arriving, Anna turned around in her seat and looked at Lydia. She said, "You are alone and friendless. You have done wrong and will take a long time to pay. Tonight we all saw you finally realize what you did to Isaac, not how it was an inconvenience to you and damage control. That was Isaac's goal. He completely destroyed Ramsay, who is having a hell of a time in prison, and not in a good way. But Isaac is not trying to deprive his daughter of an adequate mother. Therefore, on behalf of Isaac, we offer you counseling. This will help you understand why you took the wrong path and deal with the consequences. All you need to do is think about it, and if you agree, tell Fabian. When Lydia arrived, she entered the dark house, took off her coat, and collapsed on the sofa. There, in the darkness, she let go of her emotions. At the forefront was remorse and a deep sense of loss, all due to her own actions. Isaac suffered, but was able to move on and find new happiness. Now she had to try to do the same. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.